So a little bit about myself. I'm Inspector Sarah Krebs. I have worked for the Michigan State Police now. I'm in my 23rd year this year. Started when I was 12 and a half. Yeah. So throughout my entire service to the state police, so 20 years of my 23 years I've been a forensic artist. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that's been like and where it has gotten me, and talk a little bit about what I've been doing because of some of the casework that I have come across. So we're going to talk about a lot of different things. I do want to warn you, I do have some graphic material in that I do work with unidentified remains, and I identify the deceased. So if you're queasy or you don't know if you're gonna be, I'm not offended if you need to like turn your head or walk out, whatever you need to do. But if you watch shows like Bones or CSI or any of those mainstream Hollywood productions that they're showing on TV today, you've probably seen worse. My stuff is just real. So just warning you ahead of time. I don't do this full time, I will tell you. Forensic artists within our agency are part-time. We only do our forensic art when we're called. So it's one of our specialty units. There are 6 of us in our unit across the state, and we each are responsible for a certain region of the state. So I handle the Metro Detroit area. Guess who's the busiest? Yeah. And I've been down here all of my career. So I've always been the Metro Detroit artist. So all of my casework too, most of it comes from the Metro Detroit region. So you'll probably see some cases you might recognize. Go ahead. Sure. Yeah. So I got my training through the FBI in forensic art, and they have one artist in Michigan that I work with all the time. That's also a forensic artist. And he's very fancy and famous. He has done drawings on, like, are you familiar with the Delphi murders in Indiana? The 2 girls that were walking across the bridge, and he did the sketch on that case. Yeah. There are other agencies as well that have forensic artists outside of MSP in Michigan. So like Dearborn PD has their own artists. The Detroit Police Department has several artists. Hamburg Township has their own artists. So, and we all train together, so we all know each other pretty well. All the Michigan artists, pretty much, we recognize each other's art on TV, and we all kind of know who does what. So if you're wondering what forensic art even is, it is really any type of artwork that can aid in policing. So this spans, it's very broad. So there's many different types and many different types of cases that we apply forensic art to. But really, it's meant to either identify somebody, apprehend somebody, convict somebody, or locate somebody, or a venue. And I'll explain that more when we talk about how we apply the artwork. There's many different ways that a forensic artist can work. Some people only do a certain discipline because they're only trained in one thing, or they only manipulate photos because they can only use Photoshop. They have no real drawing skills, but they have computer skills. Some people only deal with the unidentified remains because they work in a coroner's office or a medical examiner's office. Or there's people like me that do all of them because I was the only person that they had to do any of these things. So I got trained in everything. And so I have at least something in all of these categories to show you. So composite sketches are, go ahead.
Where do you get your training?
So I got my training mostly through the FBI, in forensic art specifically, through the FBI, and I've also been trained through some schools outside of the FBI that were instructors at my FBI school. But I got training at the Scottsdale Artist School, is one of the schools I went to. I went through Quantico. They had a training for forensic art specifically called forensic facial imaging. And then all of my other art training is natural. So I've never had formal art school. I'm not a formally trained fine artist by any means. Most of my training outside of the specific forensic artist schools have just been, it's just been natural stuff.
Any of the colleges train any of those things you talked about the first line? That, you know, like a law enforcement majors and things like that?
There's only one college that has a discipline in forensic art, and it's in Scotland. Yes. And one of the reasons is I only know maybe 10 forensic artists across the country in the US that are full-time forensic artists, and that's probably why. Is the discipline's really small? So there's not really college courses that support, and a lot of colleges will have a class in this. In fact, a lot of high schools have forensic art classes, which is really exciting to me, to teach kids like what it's about, but there's not a whole lot of jobs in the industry for a forensic artist. So that probably explains most of it. Okay, so composite sketches are what I do most in my forensic art field, and they're probably what you recognize the most as being what a forensic artist would do. I'm a sketch artist, right? So I take people's verbal descriptions of events and things that happened and places that they've either been to or seen or something got stolen, and I take their verbal direction and I put it into a picture. So when most detectives or police officers do an interview with a witness or a victim about something they saw, they write notes. And their notes are words, right? Because that's what they know how to do. I have the same exact ability, but instead of writing words, I draw a picture. And that's really the only difference. So this is actually an extensive set of notes about what happened or what somebody looked like. The only difference is I can put it into the form of a drawing, where most police officers or detectives don't. They write down notes. So you can see that composites can be a lot of different things. They can be faces, they can be tattoos, they can be different types of faces, so a frontal image, a profile image, depending on how you saw somebody. They can be a venue or a location. Sometimes I draw maps of where people drop body parts. And sometimes I draw objects, and usually objects are drawn from thefts or breaking and entering. Something was stolen, and they have a verbal description of what that item looked like, but not a photograph. So I can draw a sketch of it. These are just some random composite sketches I pulled from my files of goofy looking people that I've drawn. And you can see a lot of disguises. That happens a lot. So when people commit crimes, they like to put on a disguise to alter their appearance. So I end up drawing lots of disguises. And then you can see some jewelry. Jewelry is usually something that was stolen or pawned, where we have, it's usually like heirloom or something really interesting where we want to get it back. And it's a very intricate, description of what it was. So having a drawing of it and going and looking for it is a lot easier than just, hey, I'm looking for this cross. If you've been to a pawn shop and you try to find like a cross that somebody pawned, there's hundreds. So to know exactly what your victim is describing, to have it in a picture is way easier when you're trying to locate that item. Tattoos are huge. They're very identifying, and they're all very different. So in today's world, a lot of our suspects have tattoos, and maybe that's the only thing that was visible. So think of COVID and think of how many crimes occurred during COVID where people had the best excuse in the world to have their face covered, because you had to. So we had a lot of crimes where I couldn't be helpful at all because I can't remove face masks from people. But a lot of times they have a giant tattoo on their forearm or something on their neck that's very identifiable, and that could be what breaks the case. So I might do just the drawing of a tattoo instead of a face. These are some what we call hit drawings. So there's a life photo, meaning that person was identified because of the composite. And you can see the composites can vary at times. Sometimes they're super detailed, and sometimes they're very vague and kind of like not a ton of information. That's probably my witness. My witness was very vague, and it's hard to make up stuff and make my drawings very exciting when your witness is vague. But that happens. But you can still have a successful drawing even with a vague witness. I don't remember all these stories. I can just tell you that the person was identified. And sometimes people get identified in a case and it's the wrong person. So that happens a lot. So I will draw somebody, we will figure out who that person was, and it's not our suspect. It was the janitor or somebody else that belonged at the scene. And they got described to me because they were suspicious or whatever the reason being. And I ended up drawing. It's still successful in my eyes. I identified somebody. It was just the wrong person for the case. So I know, did I do that? Okay, so this guy up on the upper right corner, the kid, I do remember that one because that sketch was put into like one of the local free papers. Do you guys get one of those here? So you don't ask for it, it shows up in your mailbox. So one of those papers, and we'll talk about those a lot because a lot of my composites end up in those for some reason, and they solve cases. So he got put in a local paper, and his mom turned him in because she was like, "This is you." And he's like, "Yeah, it was me." Okay, so the next type of art, we're going to talk about age progression. So age progression can be a couple different things. It can be a child to an adult. It can be an adult to an adult. And you can approach it different ways. You can do sketches to age progress, but you can also use Photoshop, which we call digital manipulation. And most age progression, we do Photoshop because usually you have a photo to start out with, right? And it's easy to manipulate it into your age progression. But sometimes when either the picture is too old or it's too crappy, is crappy a good word? It's not very professional, but if your picture is too crappy, you cannot use Photoshop. And this was one of those cases, the last known photo I had, this is a child to an adult, which is honestly the hardest type of age progression to do, because not only do you have aging, but you actually have craniofacial growth that occurs when you're age progressing a child to an adult. And this one is a really long time span. So the last known photo was at age 9, and I'm age progressing to age 50, which a lot of aging has gone on. So when we do age progression, we are actually we're studying the heredity of the family as well. So we need help with the family. They need to be supportive of our mission, and they need to supply us with photos. So usually when we're doing, especially a missing child, we have lots of help from the family because they are very invested in finding that missing child. So missing children cases, it's easy. We get a lot of photographs of what the parents, the mom and the dad, and also siblings looked like as they age to the age that we're trying to appropriately age progress to. So we're looking at photographs of mom, sisters especially, the sex of the individual is usually important, but we'll look at brothers too, and dads, and look at what do they look like at age 50, because that's our target age. And then we will make some hypothesis of what our person's gonna look like at that age as well. And a lot of it is just guesswork, but there's a lot of training in this too on how aging affects the face and the muscles, and a lot of gravity goes into this. So one thing that we cannot predict is a lady's hair color. It's actually the hardest thing to predict, and I did not get it correct in this case. But I should say too that not all of our casework is criminal. I try to concentrate most of my cases on criminal matters, but this case was actually not a criminal act. This was a case of foster care, where all of the children had been adopted out to other families, and the family actually lost track of a child. And they were much later in life, the siblings were actually looking for her. And so I took the case on as more of a training for myself to get experience in doing age progression. And the family, they supplied me with a lot of the photographs that I needed. And I was able to make that sketch. And then the family was working with a PI, so the sketch was given to the PI, who ended up finding her. And then the family sent me this reunion photo with Grandma, which is really very nice. Another type of age progression, when you do an adult to an adult, and it is a criminal matter, usually it's a fugitive case. So when fugitives go on the run, they tend to either go missing from law enforcement for many years, and they also try to alter their appearance because they don't want to get caught. So there's kind of two things going on. You have the aging, but you also have the added fact that they're probably altering their appearance in their flight. So this is a case I have kind of as a case study because it was a case that was aired on Dateline. And I did the case for the U.S. Marshal Service on a fugitive case that they were working. And there's a couple players in this. There is Agent Garcia, who is the U.S. Marshal that I did the drawing for. This is our victim in the lower right-hand corner. Her name was Rose Woolwine. She was a homicide victim in Detroit, I believe in 1988. And her boyfriend at the time was the suspect, and he was never arrested. He fled immediately after the homicide. The only suspect in the case, everybody believed it was him. There was an arrest warrant, it was never satisfied. So many years later, and I think I did this case in around 2005, he was still never arrested for the 1988 murder. So you can see me, you can tell this is an old episode because I'm with Chris Hansen, who doesn't work there anymore. So remember I told you about the quality of the photograph? So this is one of those cases. Yes, I probably would use Photoshop, but in this case, really not good photos. These are the only photos that we have of our suspect. And they're terrible. One of them is actually a fake ID that we found out that he obtained after the murder. So the picture on the right is a fictitious ID. I don't know why we couldn't have gotten a better picture from another state agency, but that's all I got. And then we have an immigration photo in the middle, and we have a family photograph actually from the victim's family that was supplied on the left. So 3 pictures of Juan Cruz, who was our suspect, and he was 18 at the time that he committed this murder. So I believe I'm doing, my age progression was about to 48 years old, so quite an age progression, but he's still an adult at 18, so less aging, at least in craniofacial growth, but you can see he's still a young guy. So when I talk use of heredity, remember I need the family's help. Do you think I get it in a fugitive case? Almost never. But we're detectives and we have access to things like SOS photos and mugshots. So I looked up his two brothers that I knew from intelligence that we got, that he looked a lot like one of his brothers, and it was the one on the top, Moises. So I pulled up Moises's driver's license photo because he's a resident of Michigan and has a driver's license. And when you get one, you sign away all your rights because now I can access your photo. So I got his picture, used that for my age progression because that's my intel, that he looks a lot like that brother. And this is another brother, but the family, or the friends of the family said that he definitely looks a lot more like his brother Moises. So using the heredity, these are the versions of the drawings that I came up with. And it's the same drawing actually, just 3 different looks. So I only draw him once. And then with overlays, so basically tracing paper, I can give him different hairstyles and different shirts and different, I didn't do too much. I mean, he kind of looks the same in all of them, just a little bit different on the facial hair. Because I don't know, facial hair is kind of, it can come and go very quickly. And it can be different shapes and different sizes and who knows. So that's, and you can see if you go back to the picture of Moises, I did base a lot of my sketch on him. That everybody said he looks a lot like his brother. Well, why don't I just draw his brother? So that's what I did. So that's the sketch, and you can see, I also did it in color, which I don't usually do, like composite sketches, I don't do that, but I also knew that this was gonna be on Dateline. So I got fancy. So these were then used with the U.S. Marshals and the Federales because we believe that he fled to Mexico. And in May of 2011, he was arrested. And this was a surveillance photo from the day that they made the arrest. And I don't know about you, but I want to point out that I am psychic. The blue shirt, yeah. I totally knew he was going to wear a blue shirt. Yeah, very impressive. I did not guess the glasses. I don't know why I didn't think like people that are 48, hello, might need glasses. But anyways, he got arrested. He got brought back to Detroit. Now he's now serving a life sentence in Michigan for his crime. So a little bit more, so I've talked all this about Photoshop, but I'm going to actually show you what we do with it. So photo manipulation, you can do lots of things in Photoshop, and there's actually lots of elements of law enforcement where we use this. One of them is in our cyber crimes. So our cyber detectives will often chat online as 12-year-old girls. That's what they do, right? So when they do that, the people that they're chatting with are usually pedophiles, and they want a picture. And that's what they ask for. And you have to be a 12-year-old girl for them to talk to you, or else you're not making a case. Well, we also cannot use pictures of 12-year-old girls. That would be entrapment. So what do? Well, we make them up. Basically, we build girls in Photoshop. So what I do is I take a picture like this. This is actually a female police officer that has volunteered to be my 12-year-old girl. She knew I was doing this, okay? So I took her and I made her a 12-year-old. And that's all just done in Photoshop. And that is a completely fictitious person. But that will now be the profile picture. Back then when I did this, it was probably MySpace. But we have to be really savvy when we do these. We actually have to hide all of our steps. There's metadata that will show that you've altered a picture. So we have to rewrite the back end of the photograph and everything to be able to use it, because the pedophiles are actually pretty savvy themselves at trying to make sure that law enforcement is not involved in who they're trying to meet up with at the playground. So that's just one application of us using photo manipulation. This is another one. This is another fugitive case. Like I said, the fugitives will often alter their appearance to not get caught. And this one was this probably took me less than 10 minutes to do this case, so it's not like super amazing, but I have like a follow-up story to it. So this is a fugitive in Detroit. His name is Corey Gaston. I actually worked this case when I worked the Violent Crime Task Force when I was in Detroit. And he crawled into the bedroom window of a 10-year-old girl, kidnapped her, raped her, and then put her back. Why? I don't know he put her back, but we're happy about that. And she was able to, basically she knew who he was, so we were able to know who had done the crime, and then he fled for many years. So some of the intel that we got on him was like as soon as he knew that we were looking for him, he went bald and clean shaven. So the only pictures that we had of him, I don't know if you can see, they're kind of small in that wanted flyer. He always had facial hair, and he always had a full head of hair. So I'm not even kidding you, in less than 10 minutes, I could Photoshop all his hair out. And then that composite, which this is actually a composite, ended up on his wanted flyer by the US Marshals. And it doesn't say anything about it being a composite, but that is. So that's circulated, and he went on the run for really a long time. I can't remember what year this was, but it was probably around 2006. Judging on when I was on the Violent Crime Task Force, and he was arrested last year. And that's what he looked like. So I kept that in here just because I knew that I had a follow-up for you, and sometimes that's satisfying to at least know that we have ends to these cases. But he was finally found last year, and guess what country he was in? Yes, he was in Mexico too. So he got extradited back to the US, and he is also serving a life sentence now in Michigan.
Did you get help from the Mexican authorities just to find him with their composites?
Yep, the federales and the US Marshals work very closely together. And he doesn't look very good. That's what 20 or so years on the run will do to you.
So are there any other countries that you guys really like this?
I mean, yeah, they're all over the world, you know. It just happens to be two of the cases that I worked on ended up in Mexico. It's probably...
Was there any other countries that they fled to that you assisted with?
No. These are the only fugitive cases that I've personally worked on, and both of them were found in Mexico. And I don't even know what part of Mexico he was in. I know that Juan Cruz was in Chetumal, which is down by Belize, by the Belize border. But, yeah, that's all I know is they're found in that country. Okay, so post-mortem. So this is where it gets kind of gross if you're queasy. So post-mortem drawing, that just means that the deceased person that I'm trying to identify is still recognizable, meaning I can just look at them and know what they look like. But I have to put them back together because the picture or the state that they're in is inappropriate for media purposes. And this is only a problem in the US because I can tell you what, in European countries or in Mexico, this would be like on the front page, the autopsy photo. It's like we're just not there yet as a society. We're queasy, and the media will definitely not print this. So we have to do something with forensic art to make it presentable so we can use it in the media. So that's where I come in. So in postmortems, I either will work from the body itself, or I'll get images, and yes, I Photoshop those too. So if I get a really decent cell phone snap, I'll throw it in Photoshop and make them presentable depending on what it is. Sometimes they're really easy. It's just like opening eyes, and I cut and paste eyes from other pictures. Sometimes my husband's like, he thinks it's super creepy that I put his eyes on dead people, but I do. Depending on what I need. I do source from, reference photos that I have. But I will, fix them up in Photoshop and put them back out, or I do something like this. So this was a sketch that I did at the morgue, where I'll actually just stand next to the gurney and I'll draw them up. And I'm basically trying to present them as what they look like in their driver's license photo. Just a simple sketch to get them identified. And you can see this one got him identified. Usually we use it with TV media, but sometimes if they don't get identified right away, it'll go to print media or now the web. I'm really dating myself by how many cases of mine predate the internet. So that kind of brings me to the last point of my talk today is all of these cases that I have worked made me an advocate for the missing person, because I've worked so many unidentified remains cases. In every single case I've ever worked where I've identified somebody, they were a missing person except for Casket Man, because he was there for a reason. So he wasn't missing. But it made me an advocate for the missing, so I started back in 2010. Our first event was in 11, a mission called Missing in Michigan. And it was a way to recognize the family members, because I've met a lot of families through these cases where I figured out like nobody's looking for their loved one, and here we've had them the whole time. So nobody's connecting the dots between the unidentified people and the missing people. So I just said I could probably do that. So I started doing it for a whole career. So in 2011, I founded Missing in Michigan, which started out as a one-day event. It is now founded as a nonprofit, and we do it every year. So we're in our 12th year this year of Missing in Michigan. We call it Missing Persons Day now, but it's the annual Missing Persons Day event in Michigan, and all of our families will come and gather that are either still missing their loved one or their loved one was found, and they come to support the other families now with their search. So it's a great event. We usually hold it on May 25th, which is International Missing Children's Day, and we have it at Madonna University right here in Southeast Michigan. So these are all pictures from past events, but we have we've solved hundreds of cases from these events. Both finding loved ones alive and well, and also connecting them to the cases I've showed you today. So on both sides, but hundreds of cases where across the nation too that we've solved by hosting this and collecting DNA. So that's one of the unique features of Missing in Michigan, is that we always sneakily are getting the families taking their DNA for reference samples and solving cases through the DNA usually. So some stats, we have right around 4,000 missing people in Michigan at any given time. And we usually, right now, I think we have about that many unidentified remains. Again, they're fluid numbers because you're solving cases and new ones come in all the time. And that's all I have for you. So now it's question and answer time. Go ahead.
Since we can't see our own features other than in reflection, have you ever done a self-portrait of someone describing you?
No, I have not. We do a lot of training. So the training that we do as forensic artists for composites, like what you're talking about, is usually we will take either a celebrity or somebody that we have a picture of, a known person, and we break down the face by features, and we use our photo reference books to do it. So we'll like kind of make a tally sheet of, okay, this is a white male, he's between 30 and 45 years old, he has light brown hair. We'll go through, and at the end of it, so we interview somebody who knows who it is, and they describe the person to us, so we can go back and forth, because the composite interview is a real back and forth between the artist and the witness. And then at the end of it, we figured out it was Brad Pitt. You know, so we do a lot of those in our training, where we're getting real experience interviewing somebody about somebody that they saw or know. But it's way easier when you know the person than you saw them for 30 seconds and they had a gun held to your head, if you can imagine the trauma associated with a lot of these interviews.
So what do you think is more important in your training or your natural abilities? Being able to be an artist, or being able to be more the technical detail of how you put the pieces together?
I think being a better interviewer is a better trait than being a good artist. So I have seen fantastic artists, like portrait artists, fail miserably as a forensic artist. And I've seen people with mediocre art skills be great forensic artists, because they can draw out the likeness of the person better than a portrait artist. And I'll say a lot of like fine artists are too, their ego gets in the way. And that's the biggest, like, they can't get over their own ego. Because a lot of my drawings, they look like crap. I mean, sometimes I'm really disappointed in myself as an artist because I had a really bad witness, like the kid picture that his mom turned him in. That was a pretty bad drawing. Like, I didn't like it at all. But it looked just like him. And when it identifies the person and you're like, oh yeah, that's exactly what she was saying, that's when you're like, yep, I got that right, because it identified them. But you might not have the best art skills. So I think being a better interviewer is a much better trait than your fine art skills.
Technology is like falling behind because it seems like it's still just the way things like you're creating images of how they are in the future and things like that, that science now would not have a better way of doing it, have all that data kind of together already, where they
Yeah.
could say a 8-year-old child would look like it's a 30 instead of.
There's a lot, there's not like a computer program though that gets it right every time.
Right.
So there are a lot of software programs now, even for composites, that have all the features in them and you just kind of cut and paste. But those are made for somebody that can't draw. Like honestly, those are made for like the detectives that have no artistic skills. They get into one of those and I call them Frankensteins, because once you start plastering a bunch of images, and they're usually image based, so you're getting like none of the skin tones match, there's no tools in it. And then what I always have is like my witness will say, well, yeah, the eyes look like that, but this one eye, it was looking over here. How do you do that in one of those man-made programs? They don't have the editing skills that they need. So either you need to know how to use Photoshop and make that eye go over here, or, you know, because there's always like something. There's always, well, his eyebrow was like this, but it had a scar through it. And that's not going to be in your photo library. So there's a lot of very unique features. I have seen some where all of the images in the software were sketches, and that was really neat, because when it comes out, it looks like a sketch, which is what you really want. You don't want a photographic image, because some of them are so good that it puts out a photograph, and then you think you're looking for that one person that looks exactly like that, where a sketch gives you that. Everybody knows what a sketch is. It's a composite sketch. You're looking for somebody that resembles it, but isn't perfect.
With the millions of people on the earth, do you personally believe that each of us has a doppelganger? Because I don't want to go to jail.
I've seen a lot of them. Yeah, and you got to know too that the forensic art is just an investigative tool. It doesn't mean that because you look like the sketch that you did it. And we have to sometimes tell detectives, like, hey, I get it, he looks like the sketch, but you got to have some corroborating evidence that he was there. You can't just make an arrest based on the sketch alone.
I remember seeing the news,
So-
there was a gentleman newscaster or whatever.
And it looked just like, I remember that.
Exactly like.
Yeah, I've had a couple now where, and I've also had, I should tell you that a lot of the sketches that I do are false police reports. So a lot of times I'll interview a witness and they will lie to me. And a lot of times who they're describing is somebody they know, but it's the wrong person. And a lot of times they're not smart enough to not like describe a celebrity to me, like Eminem. I've drawn him more than once now. And usually I can tell, I can pick apart their interview to know that they're not being truthful. But sometimes not. Sometimes they're describing somebody that they know that I don't know, and it reads the same in the interview, that they're actually trying to create somebody. But I also have people that I call it the ghost. So they will draw somebody that they're making up at the moment. Right. So when I ask them a question, they pull out of their data bank, like this and like this. And then once they get really confident, they start to make a monster and they monsterize it, where then it's all of a sudden this is like this vicious looking suspect, you know, with like blood coming out of the mouth, and like I'm like, you didn't tell me that in the beginning. And it's a maturity sometimes level with your witness where they gain confidence and their lies get better and better and better, and it's really easy for me to see too. But
Yeah, this is helping person being able to identify, maybe do a sketch, like two people were trying to describe a face.
No. Actually, I do not like helpers in the room.
I mean, two eyewitnesses. I mean,
No, same. Because you could have one witness that was just an introvert and really quiet and shy, and then one really chatty, super helpful. This person might have had a better description, but this one will overpower them. So usually I'll interview them separately on the same person. Sometimes do two separate sketches, and then decide myself who I think the better witness was. Sometimes do one sketch and work with the strong one first, and then follow up with the second person to find out if they think it correlates or not. And sometimes minor changes will be made, but I'll preserve the first one for court documentation, and then put out the other one to the public though.
Okay.
But I keep both.
Then the follow-up question, like, these TV shows you see where they put these pictures in, they do like a database search of photos to get a hit on.
Like,
identifying
yeah, facial
somebody.
yeah.
With the kind of work
the biometrics.
Yeah, is that
So
where you're-
we've tried that, but the sketches never hit in our biometric searches because they're so, you think about a sketch like I am not perfect on distances between features, and that's what that reads. The algorithm in those facial identification searches, they actually read, they map your face, and they'll map the composite, but my composite doesn't always, it's not perfect measurements, because I could never do that. So it never works. We've never had a hit in our facial recognition searches on a composite. It'll read the face, it'll map it, but you'll get actually a bunch of people that are like wrong gender, wrong race. It's mapping my composite and giving you, oh, here it is, here's your people. But facial recognition software, that works. It's amazing, like the technology that they have now. And I know it's kind of gotten a bad rap, mostly because of shoddy detective work, but there is no greater tool to law enforcement right now to identify people than facial recognition. Because if you have a surveillance image, you have a picture of the person, you just don't know who they are, you slap it in there and it goes and spits out your candidates and you're like, oh my God, it's him. But you still have to back it, remember it's just an investigative lead. You still have to back it up with the evidence to put the person in the crime. And what has happened is there's been detectives that had spit out the result and they went and made an arrest. And it was the doppelganger. And you can't do that. It's an investigative lead only. Go ahead.
How many of your witnesses that you're interviewing are children? And then how do you deal with them being a minor? And does somebody have to be in the room?
No, usually I have parental permission. I do a lot of minors. The youngest I've ever interviewed was 8. And may have been one of my better witnesses ever. So kids are really good. Yeah, they're very observant. They don't have as many words in their vocabulary, which can be frustrating, but they definitely can be a better witness than an adult. They have less biases. A lot of times they will relate really well to somebody looking like somebody else, so I do a lot of talk about referencing somebody else that had a similar feature, and they're really good at that. You know, telling me that you look like whoever, whatever rapper it was, and I'm like, who? And I gotta pull out Google and do an image search. This person? Because I don't know. You have to learn. You have to be a very versatile interviewer because you're dealing with a lot of people across many different demographics. Sometimes the slang that's being used, I won't know what they're talking about. And I'll be like, I'm sorry, what? And sometimes it's just like there's cultural differences. I remember one time I was interviewing a little girl about a man that did whatever, and she kept saying that he had a perm. So I kept drawing these like beautiful coiled curls, because that's what a perm is to me. And she was like, giving me the side eye, and I'm like, she finally took the book away from me and found a picture. So a perm to her, she was black, and a perm in their world is you're getting your hair straightened. And so she was describing a man that had like straightened hair, which to me, from the thumb by the way, I was like, what? I learned. I'm honest enough to call it out, like, checked myself, okay, now I know what a perm means to this culture, right? Because it's not the same thing, and that happens a lot. So there'll be cultural differences where I have to kind of be like, okay, this is what it is to me, what is it to you? And we'll work it out. And like I said, a lot of generational differences, so like kids will use language that I'm like, no idea what you just said, you know? Yeah, translate that for me, and you know, so you have to be adaptable is probably the best word I can use.
How much time do you spend in court? And do you wear, there's pictures, do you wear a uniform and weapons
During interviews?
during your work? Yeah.
Not when I do most of my work, no. So when I interview people on composites, almost never. Unless I happen to be driving a patrol car and somebody calls me immediately and I have to go, that would be probably the only time. But I'm not going to say it never happened, but I try not to wear a uniform, and I do testify in court. Usually it's years and years after these cases. So a lot of times it's in the homicide trial, after I've identified somebody from DNA, and it happens, 4 years down the road after. So sometimes I have to be like, what case is this? Oh, you identified that person? Thanks for telling me. So yeah, I do spend a lot of time in court.
I'm interested in your title of inspector. Is that a rank?
It is.
Are you a sworn officer?
Yes.
Oh,
Yep, so inspector is one rank below captain.
okay.
And I know it's kind of a new term. In England, I would be a detective. But I'm not. It's just the rank below a detective. So I'm an assistant division commander in our rank structure.
But you do regular police work as well as the art, right?
Yep. Yep. So back 20 years ago, I was pushing a patrol car around. Now I drive a desk. So I am like my current title right now, I'm the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for MSP. So I oversee the DEI in our department, which is like the equal opportunity and civil rights claims, anything in the diversity, equity, and inclusion realm. And I'm also the head of our recruiting and selection. So I oversee those
You
sections.
can't even write your title on a form.
No, I know. Yeah.
Put it on a business card.
Yeah, it fits on a business card. Now I have a QR code.
Anthropology probably helped with that too.
Yeah, so my degree in anthropology definitely helped. I never thought that getting in anthropology and going into the state police to be a police officer were going to correlate, but they did. So I ended up working at the Wayne County morgue for about 7 years when I headed our missing persons unit when I was a detective sergeant. And that definitely, I never thought, again, that I would use my degree, and I did. And then I went on, I'm in grad school now, so I'm getting my MBA in leadership. And I just finished a certificate program in leadership, so I got a certificate in public leadership. So continuing my education for the afterlife.
You were flush with the medical examiners?
Yep. So I worked in the Wayne County Medical Examiner for most of the time that I was in the Missing Persons Unit. We did all of their caseload for their unidentified cases. So that's where a lot of those solves came from too. So they had a lot of backlog that we addressed, and we did the DNA on it, and we exhumed a lot of bodies, and everything that they had above ground, we call it above ground or below ground, everything they still had above ground, we DNA typed it. So we were going through all their remains that were in the freezers and the storage and the dry storage and sending them in for DNA. We got a lot of hits just by doing the DNA in it. And then whatever, they always had bodies coming in weekly there.
How long does the DNA testing actually take to get that?
Depends. So if it's soft tissue, like deep tissue sampling, it's a lot easier for them than mitochondrial, because if it's in the bone, they have to go to mito, and the mitochondrial could take months. And I'm not a DNA analyst, so I can't tell you how they do it. Good.
So you said when you started that you're part-time? Part-time with all those jobs that you have.
Oh, well, that's 23 years of part-timing it. When I was in missing persons, though, it was more full-time. So I did a lot more of it for like the 7 years I was in that unit. That's all I did. So a lot of my casework is from when I was at missing persons because I had access to a lot of cases, and that's all I did. So most of what you're seeing here is from when I was at missing persons.
So doing this program, how is this part of your job?
It's not really. No, it is. As a representative of our forensic art unit, I do these once a month, just for public, for community outreach. And it's really kind of the only forensic art I do now, because like I said, I steer a desk and I'm in charge of our DEI program, and I'm really busy at work now. And I have also 4 kids at home. One is not mine. I have a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, and I have a 16-year-old Pakistani exchange student right now.
And you're in school.
And I'm in grad school. Yeah.
When do you sleep?
I do. When my kids let me. Yeah. Good.
So do you have any, like, unsolved cases that you worked previously that are now like cold cases, and then you have to redo like cases or something like that?
None of them where I've had to redo the art. So in today's technology, we have forensic genetic genealogy, which is changing everything. So FGG, as we call it, that's solving a lot of my cases now, that the forensic art is like not even on the board. Like that is solving everything now. So a lot of my old cases are now getting put through FGG. And it's awesome because now I'm getting results like on the regular. So one of my cases in the Grand Rapids area just got solved. It was a 1997 Jane Doe cold case homicide, and they identified her from FGG. I think that St. Clair County case is going through FGG right now. So a lot of them are in the process. And it's really exciting for me. It's like winning the lotto when I get an email that one of my cases got solved, and then I get to see the face and compare it. How well did I do?
Is there like a whole section of, police officers, investigators that just work on cold cases, or, like some of these cases you're saying are solved like 20 years later, and I'm just curious, like, is there a team dedicated,
Not-
are they just picking it up?
It depends, depends on what agency you're talking about. For MSP, we have one cold case team, and they're in Lansing. And right now, they're only working on that district, but they have so much casework that that's all they can handle. There's so many cold cases in that one district, and that's like, 6-county area surrounding Lansing. But they're so busy that they can't take on other cases outside of that. Mostly the cold case units, they don't have funding, and it's really hard for us to just staff our regular troopers on the road and detectives every day. We have staffing problems because right now nobody wants to be a cop. I'll be honest with you. So it's really hard for us to retain employees and to get people to come into our department. Remember, I'm the head of recruiting and selection, so this is like a big problem for me.
What about those cases that got solved in Mexico, like, all those years later? Was that?
Feds. Those were both federal cases. So, you have, we have a lot of, I've been wishing for a cold case unit my whole career because I would love that. That's my jam. I would do that all day. I'd quit my job today if I could be a cold case detective full time. But they're just really hard to find and to get funding for.
Did you say you support a lot of the local police forensics unit? Because
Yeah.
like a Farmington Hills, Lyon,
Yep.
they don't have that.
We support all law enforcement wherever. So I've done cases out of state. I have skulls shipped to me if they don't have a forensic artist. Like I said, there's not a ton of us in the nation. There's only a handful of us that do it full time, and it's not me. But most of the large urban metropolitan agencies will have at least one. So like Houston PD, LA PD, Detroit PD, Chicago, they all have a full-time staff member that usually is doing all their work for them. Go ahead. 9%.
That's all?
I know that again because of my day job. Yeah, 9%. And we're working to change that, but again, it's hard just to get police officers right now, let alone, this is a male-dominated field. A lot of women, don't want to be in law enforcement, or if they do, they're like, oh, I want to just be the detective part. And it's hard to skip over the rest of it, so.
I understand too, I know someone who's a trooper in another state, and I understand state troopers are one of the rigorous qualifications to go through. In terms of
Yeah.
training and.
It's our training academy is very tough.
As opposed to a local
Right.
township.
Yeah, most of the local agencies, it's almost like, I won't say it's a college, but that's what I envision it as. Ours is boot camp. You live there. Mine was 22 weeks. I will never want to do it again. Like if they told me today I had to go back recruit school, I'd be like, see ya. It's really hard. And one of our guests in here, her husband is also in my department and also went through recruit school, and it is it was really hard. So yeah, we lose a lot of people in recruit school. So we have one that started 3 weeks ago now, and the attrition rate is awful. People, they're just not prepared for.
It's a vetting thing. It makes sure the ones that.
Yeah, we really try to let them know like what it's going to be like and prepare them for how bad it's going to be, and we still lose people. So it's not a day at the park.
Is the FGG a combination of anthropology and DNA and vital work?
It's not. It's forensic genetic genealogy. So they're taking the DNA. They're getting. They're basically using ancestry trees. So the publicly sourcing it through the websites where people post their results, and they're finding relatives and then working back to who their suspect or victim was. And that's how the Golden State Killer was solved. There's been a lot of them now, but the original case was the Golden State Killer in Sacramento, California. So I have to end it because I know that the library is closing.
Thanks for your service.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much.